Good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and call to order the County Planning Commission for February 26, 2024. If you'll please call the roll.
Yes, Commissioners Borja.
Here.
Conklin. Corona Sabagnano.
Here.
Devlin. And Rathel.
Here.
And we do have our quorum.
Thank you. If you'll all please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. If you'll please make the announcements for this evening.
Yes, the county fosters public engagement during the meeting and encourages public participation, civility, and use of courteous language. To make an in-person public comment, please complete a speaker request form and hand it to the clerk. The chairperson will call your name when it's your turn to make a comment. To make a public comment by telephone on the day of the meeting, dial 916-875-2500 to make a verbal public comment. Follow the prompts for instructions. Refer to the agenda and listen to the live meeting to determine when the best time is to call to be placed in queue for a specific agenda item. Callers may be on hold for up to an extended period of time and should plan accordingly. When the chairperson opens public comment for a specific agenda item or off-agenda matter, callers will be transferred from the queue into the meeting to make a verbal comment. Each agenda item queue will remain open until the public comment period is closed for that specific item. You may also send a written comment to boardclerk@saccounty.gov, and your comment will be routed to the board and filed in the record.
Thank you. We'll get started on the contested portion of the agenda this evening. Item number 1, will you please call it?
Yes, your item number 1 this evening is for a use permit amendment, special development permit and design review, located at 6621 Florin Road, approximately 300 feet east of the intersection of Lindale Drive and Florin Road in the South Sacramento community, and the environmental document is an addendum. We do not see him as of yet, but our moderator is keeping an eye out.
Good evening, Commissioners. Jessica Brandt, Planning. We do not have the applicant present for item number 1 as of yet. We understand that they will be on the Zoom call, and so I don't know if we would like to proceed or perhaps hold this item until later to see if we can get the applicant.
Yeah, we can shift the agenda around, so just let us know if the applicant signs on. We can go ahead and move on to item number 2.
Okay, so for item number 2 this evening, we have a large lot tentative subdivision map and design review. Let's see, I apologize. Located at 4103 Zinfandel Drive in the Cordova community. And the environmental document is an addendum to a prior final environmental impact report. And Metro, if you could please queue up item number 2's presentation.
These are the revised conditions. Can we hand them out?
You're welcome. Bill, you have everything, right?
Everything I need. Alrighty, we all set? Good evening, Commissioners. Chair Rathel. I wasn't expecting to be your first planner here tonight, but hey, we roll with the punches. I'm Emma Carrico. I'm an associate planner for the county and project manager for the Mather South Large Lot Project. The project site consists of 4 parcels totaling 1,022.3 acres. The subject parcels are located within a portion of the former Mather Air Force Base, which was closed and relinquished to Sacramento County by the Department of Defense in late 1990. The county still owns the subject parcels today. The project site is vacant and undeveloped except for the Mather Regional Park at the north end and some abandoned Air Force structures scattered throughout the parcels. The entire project site is within the Mather Field Specific Plan and Special Planning Area, which was adopted by the board in 1997 to create a comprehensive plan for redevelopment of the former Mather Air Force Base. Surrounding land uses include an FAA air traffic approach control facility to the north, the Newbridge Specific Plan Area to the south, the Folsom South Canal and the city of Rancho Cordova to the east, and the Illa M. Collin Conservation Preserve to the west. On January 28, 2020, the board adopted the Mather South Community Master Plan, which was incorporated into the Mather Field Specific Plan and Special Planning Area. The master plan identifies goals, objectives, and policies to guide development of the Mather South community on the subject parcels. Of the 1,022.3 acres encompassed by the subject parcels, 803.38 acres are within the master plan boundary, which you can see here in blue. The remaining 219 acres on the north and west sides are not a part of the master plan development and will remain under county ownership. The applicant proposes a large lot tentative subdivision map to subdivide the 4 parcels into 67 large lots. The creation of the 67 large lots will allow the applicant to finance the purchase of lots from the county in manageable phases and to prepare for future development consistent with the master plan, development agreement, and public facilities financing plan. Additionally, a design review is required to demonstrate substantial compliance with the Sacramento County countywide design guidelines. The county's environmental review team did prepare an addendum to the prior Mather South Community Master Plan Environmental Impact Report certified by the board on January 8, 2020. The addendum found that the proposed project would not result in any new additional significant impacts that were not analyzed under the Master Plan EIR. The proposed project would not substantially increase the severity of previously identified significant impacts, and no site conditions have significantly changed since the Master Plan EIR was prepared. Shown on the left is the proposed large lot tentative subdivision map, which would subdivide the 4 existing parcels into 67 large lots, ranging in size from 0.79 acres to 30 acres. On the right is the approved master plan land use plan. In comparing these 2 images, you can see that the proposed large lot map reflects the land use plan. The map would create 2 commercial retail lots, 1 community center lot, 1 environmental campus lot, 3 landscape corridor lots, 9 open space drainage lots, 6 open space trail lots, 9 drainage basin lots, 5 park lots, 2 preserve lots, 25 residential large lots, 2 school lots, 1 public lot, and 1 research and development lot, all consistent with the land use plan. No development is proposed with this application. It is solely for phasing and financing purposes, as mentioned. The majority of the resultant large lots will need to be further subdivided via small lot subdivision maps before development can begin. In order to delineate between parcels that will be developable upon approval of this application and parcels that will need further entitlements prior to development, staff has prepared 2 conditions documents. One that provides conditions of approval applicable to this large lot map, which was attachment 2 to the staff report, and one that provides advisory conditions of approval that may be applicable at future stages of development, such as prior to future small lot subdivision maps or prior to building permit issuance. And that was attachment 3 to the staff report. The Cordova Community Planning Advisory Council met on June 15th, 2023 to consider the project. The CPAC voted 4 yes, 0 no, 2 absent to recommend the Planning Commission approve the requested entitlements. The Design Review Advisory Committee met on September 14th, 2023 to consider the project. The DRAC voted to recommend the Planning Commission find the project in substantial compliance with the countywide design guidelines. Before I read staff's recommendations, we do have one minor change tonight. In the original conditions of approval for the master plan, Sacramento County Water Agency required the provision of a 5.27 acre minimum site for groundwater production, groundwater treatment, and water storage facilities. This site was included in the large lot tentative map as the public parcel shown in blue right at the very top corner there where the red dot is. However, as currently configured on the currently proposed map, the parcel would not result in a gross acreage of 5.27 acres. The applicant has agreed to revise the map after this hearing through the substantial compliance process to increase the public parcel to a minimum of 5.27 gross acres as required by SCWA. In order to memorialize that requirement, staff recommends adding 3 conditions carried forward from the master plan conditions as shown on the document in front of you. Additionally, the Department of Transportation recommends a few minor text changes to 2 of their advisory conditions, which are also shown on the document in front of you. And with that, Planning and Environmental Review staff recommends the Planning Commission take the following actions. 1, determine that the previously certified Mather South Community Master Plan Final Environmental Impact Report, together with the CEQA addendum, is adequate and complete. 2, approve the large lot tentative subdivision map, subject to the findings and conditions as added and revised in the document in front of you. And 3, find the project in substantial compliance with the design guidelines, subject to the findings and conditions as revised and added. That's it for me. We do have the applicant here. Happy to take any questions, as you please.
Questions for staff this evening? All right, we have no questions for staff this evening. And we can invite the applicant up this evening.
Thank you, Chair. Phil Rodriguez with Mather South LLC, Lewis Group of Companies. I'll just say thanks to Emma for shepherding this through the entitlement process, the application process.
Yes, if we can get you sworn in first, sir,
Oh,
please.
okay.
So
Sorry
if you
about
just please raise your right hand and the appropriate responses I do. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give the commission is the truth, so help you God? If you do not swear, do you so affirm?
I do.
Okay, and you've already stated your name for the record, so if you would just say, I have been sworn.
I have been sworn.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
But thanking Emma for shepherding this through, all county staff for reviewing this. This is really for the benefit of the county. That would enable us to acquire the property with legal parcels. And I'll leave it at that. Anything else you'd like to ask? I'm happy to answer questions.
I'll kick off the easy one. Have you had a chance to review the revised conditions of approval, and you're in agreement with all the conditions of approval and advisory conditions of approval?
I've reviewed all of it, and we are in agreement with it.
Thank you. Other questions for the applicant this evening?
Just generally, first off, thank you for bringing this, and thank you, staff. I think this is a significant project, not just in size, but obviously of opportunity. And to that, what is your kind of current timeline of putting this very complex project together?
Great question. So we've been waiting since January 2020 to move forward, but we've been stuck in litigation for quite a while. That's been resolved. And so this is the first step, and it's really to create the legal parcels, then settle on a purchase price, which we have a purchase agreement with the county. There's a process for that. And as soon as that is completed, we'll start off the backbone improvement plans, small lot maps for the subdivisions within, and further planning and efforts that will enable us to start the first phase of the project. Now, I didn't ask you for time, right? So probably the next, I guess a target is the earliest we would start development, and it's probably extremely optimistic, would be April of 2025. That's the beginning of a construction season, but a lot needs to take place for that to happen. So it could slip, may slip, likely will slip into the latter part of 2025.
Just because the beginnings of this project predates my tenure on the commission, just out of curiosity, what was the litigation over? Was that over your EIR? Or?
Another property owner nearby challenged the county's great job with the EIR.
Okay. Yeah. All right. All I got.
Any other questions for the applicant this evening? Commissioner Corona, 70.
Yeah. Will you also, who will be developing, or who will be responsible for the school and the parks that are there? Will the park be turnkey?
Great question. So schools will be developed by the Elk Grove Unified School District. We will be participating in the funding of that through the payment of school development impact fees. The parks, the same fashion. We will develop the neighborhood parks, and the Cordova Park District will be developing the larger community parks, and we'll be paying fees into that program to fund the construction and the facilities within the parks.
Okay. And will those be simultaneous from when the homes and everything else is developed? Yeah,
the parks, we typically, in all of our master plan communities, we want to make sure we have adequate parkland to serve the new residents moving in. So we just, if it takes one park initially and then the second park through a phase, we'll develop that. through each phase of the project. The schools are a different story. It's really up to the school district. Typically, they want to make sure they have 50% capacity students to occupy a school before they'll open. But school districts are very savvy at moving students around within the district to get a school open earlier rather than later.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Sapignano, if you don't mind me adding on to that, there is a provision in the development agreement from the master plan that is carried forth in the advisory conditions for this application that specifies when the park parcels have to be developed consistent with surrounding residential and other facilities. So that is something that is legally required with the application.
Other questions for the applicant this evening?
I'll take one, Chair.
Commissioner
Do
Blair?
you, hopefully you don't anticipate any challenges on the purchasing of the 5.27 acre minimum?
Not at all. It's really whatever the water agency needs for their facilities. We are only developing, we're only really acquiring at the end of the day what we can develop. So any public facility, any roadways, whatever is needed, is kind of outside the boundary of what we are acquiring, because we're basically anything we take down, we give back to the county or the agency
Thank you.
through dedication.
Any other questions, commissioners? All right, thank you, Mr. Rodriguez.
Very welcome.
All right, with that, we'll move on to public comment.
And there are no public comments for this item.
And we will close public comment and move on to deliberation. Or a motion?
Most staff recommendation.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second for staff recommendation. Any other discussion? All right, please call the roll.
Okay, Commissioners Borja,
Yes.
Conklin,
Yes.
Corona Sabignano,
Yes.
Devlin,
Yes.
and Rathel.
Yes.
And the motion carries with those members present, which are all of you. So perfect.
All right, any update on the applicant for item number 1?
The applicant is on the line.
Perfect. We'll move on to item number 1.
And then let me read it back into the record. So your item number 1 this evening is a use permit amendment, special development permit and design review, located at 6621 Florin Road, approximately 300 feet east of the intersection of Lindale Drive and Florin Road in the South Sacramento community, and the environmental document is an addendum.
Good evening, Chair Rathel, Commissioners. I'm David Oriuros, Associate Planner, the planner assigned to the Sunny Slope Wireless Project, which is a 75-foot mono-eucalyptus with 6 antennas and 6 remote radio units. The subject site is located at 6621 Florin Road, approximately 300 feet east of the intersection of Lindale and Florin Road in the South Sacramento community. The site totals 0.77 acres and was originally developed in 1977 with a 9,280 square foot multi-tenant retail building. In 2009, a 65-foot monoflag wireless communication facility was installed on site. The proposed project would result in the replacement of that existing monoflag wireless facility. The project is located within the shopping center or SC zoning district. I would note that there is a slight correction to this slide. There is a multi-tenant retail building and low-rise residential to the north rather than an additional wireless communication facility. A neighborhood shopping center to the south, a multi-tenant commercial building to the east, and a takeout restaurant to the west. As noted, the site was originally developed in 1977 with a multi-tenant commercial building. In 2009, a use permit for a 65-foot tall monoflag wireless communication facility with 3 antennas was approved by the Planning Commission. Over the years, there have been a number of substantial compliance requests for new equipment, including an additional 3 antennas, which resulted in the 6 antennas which exist today. Based on that background, the entitlement package includes a use permit amendment for the replacement of the existing wireless communication facility on site with a new 75-foot mono-eucalyptus with 6 antennas and 6 remote radio units. I would note that for purposes of the code, wireless communication facilities measure height from to the top of the antenna, excluding branches of any stealthing. Including the branches for this project, total height would be 80 feet. A special development permit is also included in the entitlement package to deviate from the 65-foot height standard for Group 2 or commercially zoned properties, and separation from Group 1 or residentially zoned properties, with the standard being 3 times the height, which is based off the height of the antenna. So in this case, it would be 3 times the 75-foot antenna height, which would be 225 feet. The project proposes a 55-foot setback in this case. Planning staff has also looked into the original rationale for the 3 times the height standard, and it was concluded to be related solely to aesthetics. In regards to environmental review, the project was reviewed pursuant to CEQA, and it was determined that an addendum to the prior 2009 use permits, initial study, and negative declaration was the appropriate environmental document. And here we have the overall site plan showing the lease area at the rear of the existing commercial building. Here we have a zoomed-in view of that lease area. In terms of walls and fencing, there is an existing 6-foot-tall masonry wall to the north of the lease area to be retained. To the east and west, there are 6-foot-tall chain-link fences. And consistent with zoning code requirements, this project proposes adding slats for screening of the project. Here we have the antenna plan showing a total of 6 antennas for the site.
Public comment line. There are 8 items on the agenda. Please enter the agenda item number on which you would like.
If you, members of the public, if you could please mute yourselves and mute your phones. Thank you so much.
The period begins. You'll be transferred into the live meeting. Please listen to the following instructions. Mute your TV or any smart device that is running in the background. Speak directly into the phone. Please do not use your speakerphone option when making your comment. When you are transferred into the meeting, you will continue to hold and will hear music in the background. Please plan to hold for an extended period of time. The clerk will speak for the record, tell you how much time you have to make your comment. Stating your name is optional.
Completely connected. I can't get them. That's the one? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, David. Thank you.
No worries. Please carry on.
David.
Okay. No, thank you. Okay, so here we have the elevations of the proposed mono-eucalyptus. And here are some existing site conditions showing that 65-foot tall mono flag. And here are some photo sims of the proposed 75-foot to the top of the pole, or 80 feet to the top of the screening mono-eucalyptus. So both the South Sacramento CPAC and DRAC have reviewed the project. The South Sacramento CPAC did vote to recommend approval of the project to the Planning Commission. The DRAC reviewed the project and recommends that the project be found in substantial compliance with the countywide design guidelines. And the project is consistent with the general plan, community plan, and zoning code as conditioned. It is compatible with surrounding zoning and land uses, and there are no significant environmental concerns. And with that, staff does recommend that the Planning Commission approve the use permit and special development permit subject to findings and conditions in attachment 2, and find the project in substantial compliance with the countywide design guidelines. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. And we also have the applicant, Jake Hamilton, online with us. Thank you.
I'll kick us off. The high-level wireless towers and the 17 special exemptions that come with each of them. But let me start with the request of separation from Group 1. It's 55 feet from a Group 1 zone property. That's the one to the northeast, I'm guessing?
The northwest, let me see here. Let me pull up my map. The northeast.
Northeast. And how far are we from the structure where somebody would live?
The structure.
I just didn't have, my apologies if I missed it in there, but it looks like that property is set back considerably from the boundary. That's 55 feet.
Yeah,
I'm
I
guessing
believe
to the corner of the lot, not to the structure that's there.
That's correct. Yeah, it's 55 to the interface.
Okay. And then my next question involves the public comment letter we received with the owners saying they're actually not supportive of the project.
Right.
So can you elaborate on how we have a project in front of us that the owner wouldn't be supportive of?
Yeah, I would defer to council for that.
Yeah, ordinarily, if a third party came in and just purported to apply for a project on someone else's property, we would require the consent of the owner. But here, the applicant presented us with an easement, a recorded easement, that I reviewed and the attorney for the planning department has reviewed, and it appears to be valid to us. Now, we're not making any kind of formal judgment on the easement rights as between the owner and the applicant here. In my opinion, I think there's enough to go on here. And of course, I think we're going to hear from the owner. I think they're on the phone here. And they can let you know whatever it is underlying their opposition to this. But without knowing that yet, I think there's enough to go on for the Planning Commission to hear this item. All you're being asked to do is to determine this land use right. For this particular project, you're not deciding any kind of real property rights as between the owner and the applicant. You're not making any ruling on the easement. The owner is perfectly free to seek any kind of remedy to stop the applicant from undertaking this project, or even to stop this commission from taking an action on it. I don't know if they plan to do that, but they still can. There's also, the other thing hanging over you is that, as you may know, for projects, the cell towers, telecommunications towers, the FCC rules set a shot clock. There is a timeline for the decision maker to decide on these. And if you don't decide on it within, I think it's 90 days for this kind of tower, it will be deemed approved. So the shot clock is going to end, I believe, on March 5th. So if you don't do anything now, if you were to continue it, I don't know that we could get back here before the shot clock ends, and then the project would just be deemed approved without you having any say whatsoever. So it's going to be your choice to decide to take an action on this now, or just, not take action and have it be deemed approved and let the owners and the applicants, have it out. However, their easement actually has a provision on how they're supposed to, handle disputes or resolve disputes. So if they go through that process. But my advice to you is that there's enough to go on here for you to consider the project.
Thanks for clarifying. Other questions for staff this evening?
I guess just maybe not specific to this one, but just kind of in general. The number of cell towers, I'm fairly new to the commission here, but are we to expect one of these a month? I mean, do we have a number of these in the pipeline? Is these are going to be a regular occurrence?
Jessica Brandt with planning. My understanding in talking to the various consultants that work on cell tower siting is yes, especially with 5G and other improvements and the expectation that the cell service can do, kind of high bandwidth services. They are having to site quite a few more towers than anyone had anticipated a few years ago. So I personally had anticipated that we would have, small cell, like networks with the sort of co-located antennas, and apparently that's just not providing the bandwidth that's needed. So we anticipate a steady stream as they come through.
Commissioner Conklin?
Yeah, a quick question just regarding the footprint. As I understand it, we've got an existing platform there for the antenna, and with the increased height, are we looking at an expanded size footprint for that podium, or how does that?
No, it would be all within the existing lease area from that original 2009 use permit.
Okay, thank you.
Just follow up.
Commissioner Devlin?
No,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Oh, Commissioner Cronus Savignano.
Thank you. So, in looking at the cell coverage maps, and I think you said it as well, that there's no improved coverage. This is only for aesthetics.
So, in discussing with the applicant, they're seeing a lot more volume in that area in terms of like download, use of internet from streaming devices. And so this would be to maintain that area. And the applicant can probably explain it a little bit better than I can, but that's generally what the request is for.
Okay. Okay. Then I'll just, if the applicant can answer that, and then also just why why these improvements can't be done without raising the height. So, thank you.
Do you guys want me to respond now?
No, we're going to finish our staff questions, and then we'll invite you to address the commission.
Okay.
To the height question, I think I recall the last tower that we had, there was an ability for them to come back and make it some amount of feet taller. Could this one also go from 80 to, I think it was like 20 feet that I heard last time, go from 80 to 100 feet then?
Yes, that's correct.
And no additional request or entitlement is necessary for that?
No, just building permits at that point.
Okay.
Sure. Commissioner Conklin.
Just for clarifying, this is to enhance an existing location as, or in order to avoid building a brand new tower nearby and enhancing an already serviced area, so it's not really bridging a digital gap, if that's a fair characterization.
I think that would be correct, yes. So it would be improving or allowing for the continued viability of the use of wireless devices in that area.
Got it. And to avoid having to expend resources in a brand new location.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I think I have one more staff question, and that's just on the eucalyptus choice. I know where I'm at, we don't plant many eucalyptus trees anymore because they're invasive and we take them out. So why are we designing a pole to look like a invasive species?
Yeah, so we've seen a couple of these come through recently. I think the rationale in this case was that there's a broad-leafed tree canopy in the area, so along Florin, in the median, and then also to the north of the site. So it would fit in more than, say, like a monopine. So it would have the broad leaves versus the pine needles.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a selection of trees to choose from in our code, or
It's not in our code. I think it's really dictated by the industry, more or less.
And are there, I kind of just looked around the area. Are there you're saying there's broadleaf trees. Are there eucalyptus trees around?
I do not believe so, no.
Okay.
Well, not that I'm aware of.
So this will be the premier eucalyptus tree in the region. Okay. Understood. Any other questions for staff this evening? Oh,
Sorry, one
go
more.
ahead. Yeah.
Has the county received any complaints about the look of the current tower or anything?
Not to my knowledge,
Okay.
no.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I guess I had a kind of follow-up to that, or related. So the aesthetic of this is kind of an interaction between the applicant and staff for the eucalyptus?
For like their rationale and justification in terms of why eucalyptus, is that the question?
Yeah, how do we get there? And I guess my general overall concern is like, well, having never been to Australia, I have seen a eucalyptus tree. And this does not look like a eucalyptus tree. Not that the monopine particularly looks like a pine tree for that matter. and maybe this is a question for the applicant, but I guess technology-wise, I mean, is this just kind of like where this industry is at? This is the best that we can do.
Yeah, I mean, I would defer to the applicant for that. This is something that we've seen coming through recently. I think the mono-eucalyptus is a new concept, at least for us from what I've seen. Seems like as the years go by, they're getting more and more tree species, so.
All right, any other questions for staff before we move on to the applicant? All right. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much.
And at this time, we'll have you swear in the applicant.
Okay, Jacob, if we could have you, I'm asking to unmute you, and if you'll unmute yourself, and if by chance you're able to access your camera, that would be awesome. That would be great. Okay, if you could state your name for the record.
Sorry, I'm just getting the camera functional.
Okay, tell me when you're ready, or we'll see you, and then we can move forward with getting you sworn in.
All right, you see me?
Perfect, we do see you. So if you could please raise your right hand, and the appropriate response is I do. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give this commission is the truth, so help you God? And if you do not swear, do you so affirm?
I do.
And if you could just state your name for the record and make the statement that I have been sworn.
Jacob Hamilton, I have been sworn.
Thank you so much. Please proceed.
So to answer the questions one at a time, I guess the most recent question was regarding the design of the tree, or of the tower, I should say. So it's called the eucalyptus, but really there's a couple categories of trees. This is a general broadleaf tree. It's not necessarily a eucalyptus per se. It's a general broadleaf design that is called a mono-eucalyptus, but it's really meant to blend into, as David mentioned earlier, a canopy of broadleaf trees. And the other designs are essentially what you have is a cactus, which you will see, a saguaro type of cactus. You'll see, obviously not here, but in Arizona, you can do a monopalm, which is a palm tree. But the palm trees just do not disguise the antennas quite as well. And then your two primary are your monopines and your mono broadleaf or mono eucalyptus. And a pine tree is good too. And there are some pine trees around here, but one of the problems with the pines is that you have to crown it and taper it like a natural pine. So you end up with quite a taller tower because of the way that it has to come to a point to mimic a real life tree. And the broadleaf tree has more of a rounded top. And it's somewhat of a newer design, but you'll see this just as commonly now as you will see a pine tree. And the reason for it, the whole point of being here is it's aesthetics, but aesthetics in that we need to increase the horizontal distance between these antennas. So back in 2009 and shortly thereafter, the flagpole sites were pretty common and a popular way of stealthing. But as the streaming has grown, as the capacity needs have grown, and those type of canisters have proven to burn out. They're just too hot. They're confined to a small area, and you can only get so many antennas in there, and it just runs way too warm, and there's just only so much capacity there to put antennas because they're really crunched in there, and you need that horizontal separation to properly point the antennas and to give it the capacity that it needs. So what you're looking at is if we did that to this flagpole and we didn't make it a faux tree, essentially you'd be adding 6, 7, 8 foot arms on each side, and you'd get kind of the monopoles that you see sometimes that are not the most attractive, essentially just a non-stealth facility. And you would really see the antennas in it. That's kind of the traditional cell tower that people think of when they think of a big steel cell tower. So what we do to gain that capacity, gain that coverage, but to also keep it stealth is we do the faux trees. And also it also serves a function of keeping it open air so that it's not as confined into a tight space. So, we don't do this in most places. It still is a regular steel pole. You won't get stealthing at all. The reason being is these are just substantially more expensive. Adding branches, and all of these branches and all of these leaves are special RF transparent material that allows RF signals to travel through. And the reason that one of the commissioners brought up a good point about this replacing the need for a new site, and essentially that's true. So rather than building new sites, we try to maximize our existing assets as much as humanly possible. There's a financial reason for that, of course, also, because you want to utilize your assets that you have. And there will be some new sites probably coming down the pipe, but in reality, new sites are extraordinarily expensive, these macro sites. So we try to utilize the existing ones as much as possible. And that explains why you have the slight increase in height and why you have the big increase in horizontal distance between the antennas. You have more antennas and you have them spread apart in the tree design. And that's basically why we do it, is those macro sites are a little bit less common now. I know one of the planners did mention that, yes, there's a bunch of new sites coming on board, but those are different type of sites. Generally, the 5G sites are utility pole microcells. And we do those with utility poles. They tend to be more affordable, but you have to do more of them. And that's because of the 5G technology and the way that the wavelengths travel. It's better to be closer to the users and have more sites, less powered, closer to them. And this is a traditional macro site. These are still the absolute backbone of the network. So all those other type of microsites have help to fill in the network.
Are you here?
But this is the backbone of the network, is these macro sites talk to each other, and they're what really exchanges the signal and sucks up that capacity. Because sometimes at a busy time, you'll have full bars, but your phone won't be working. And what that is a site like this that hears you and sees you and you're communicating with it, but it's so over capacity that it's not able to hand off the signal. It's not working properly. So to avoid that, if you're within the proper range of this tower, it should be working. But in order to do that, it has to have the proper capacity. And basically, we're doing these all up and down California, swapping these flagpoles to more traditional macro sites and fake tree sites because of that, to try to maintain, but maintenance now is handling a massive influx of need. I mean, you have people, I don't need to probably explain what we do on our phone, and not just Facebook, it's not just social media, it's tons of people using it as their primary wireless device at home, which includes all of the Netflix, Disney Plus, communication, smart devices, whatever it falls in that category. We all kind of know what that is. So there's probably some other questions about aesthetics and design and just wireless in general. But also the big elephant in the room is the landowner. Obviously it's a little bit awkward when you have the owner of the land that is not in support, but that is a private dispute between SBA, the tower company, and the landowner. It's not a zoning issue. I just want to be clear about that. It's not a land use issue. It's about SBA and the carrier using power on the landlord's property, and they owe him for some of the power that's been used. So his dispute is that he hasn't been properly compensated for the power used by T-Mobile in this situation. In other words, they use a meter and they suck power. And then I believe in this situation, I do the land use, but my understanding is that they've been taking power and the landowner does not feel properly compensated for that. I know that SBA is aware of that, and I know they're handling it. The landowner may have a different interpretation of the remedy and how that's being handled, but I do know that it's not a land use dispute. It's not a zoning dispute. This forum is being used as a means of leveraging some of that authority, but the reality is that it's not the correct forum, that is a property dispute that is a legal dispute and is not proper for this forum. That's one of the reasons this is being heard. Anyway, I probably missed some of the questions, so hopefully you're still awake and you have some questions for me.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. On the height, I know there was a question on that. I see on the diagrams, you've got the proposed top of branches at 80 feet above ground level. And I was just curious, is that with other providers co-located on the tower, or do you expect this to actually go higher later on down the road?
No, that's a good question, because I know there was some discussion of the FCC and the shot clock and the Spectrum Act. That's different than the shot clock, but there's basically a provision that allows a 20-foot extension as a building permit only. But there is some intricacies to that because when you have a stealth site like this, you're not allowed to defeat the stealthing. In other words, we can't just throw a 20-foot extension pole on top of that and do a building permit only when you have conditions that have to be complied with and it defeats the stealthing, which in this case, it clearly would. So there's still a level of review if a co-locator came along and it wanted to be extended in height. There's structural capacity reasons that the pole is designed at the height and it's a tree, so it's not as simple as just throwing another 20 feet on top and adding branches. They wouldn't match. It would be discolored. It'd be more likely that you would co-locate below the current antennas. That would be more likely with usually what you need is 10-foot separation, tip to tip antennas. And what they would do there is put socks on the antennas, add branches, maintain the stealthing. I mean, that has to be required. And I do these all the time. And there are situations where one carrier has done a modification, they've added socks, they don't match the existing branches, the branch are discolored. But we usually fix that and we're required to, and that conditions state as much too. There's conditions in this conditions of approval, and there's conditions in virtually all of them, particularly in California, that require us to maintain the tower, keep it uniform, make sure that all the branches match, and make sure that it maintains its aesthetic look.
Thank you, commissioners. Other questions for the applicant or ones that were missed?
Quick question, Chair.
Sure.
Thank you for the applicant for being here this evening. Typically we've looked at a setback requirement of 1 foot for every foot of height. We have a 75 feet of height, and you're only proposing a 55-foot setback from the other properties. I was wondering if you could kind of share a little bit more. I know one of our staff members mentioned that it's more aesthetics, but I'm also kind of looking at the map here and to see if for some reason, God forbid, that something was to happen, you have a parking lot close to those apartments on the, I would say, northwest corner of your property. And just wasn't sure whether or not that specific setback is enough for safety reasons.
And is that in case the tower were to fall? Is that the assumption, I guess?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, number one, they're designed to not fall. And if there's a worst case scenario, catastrophic event, say a fire, which would be, NorCal, not unheard of, they're designed to collapse on themselves. So even if they do fail, they fail in the center and they collapse upon themselves. And if you'll see some of there has been cell tower fires in the past, you can see kind of how they fall. So it would never really be a situation, at least that I've ever seen, where it just falls like a tree at its base. It won't fall all 80 feet or 75 feet in one direction. And they're specifically designed to crumble and not fall like that.
Okay.
And we have proven that in the past too. We've provided letters from engineers that are, I forget what they're called, but we do provide sometimes stamped letters that confirm that from the structural engineer that say, look, if this ever anything worst case scenario were to happen, and they're designed obviously to not do that, just to be clear, but they are designed structurally to fail and fall upon themselves and not over.
Okay, thank you. And then just out of curiosity too, that property that's kind of adjacent to the north, they have like a freestanding canopy structure that looks to me like there's solar involved. Have you, as being good neighbors, have let them know that the change of your project may impact their solar capacity?
I haven't, no. I haven't seen where it sets and how the sun too would affect that. Basically, I think the sun it could, I suppose, because the sun is primarily in the south, right? Going from east to west, but I have not, generally don't look at that. If it's an issue, we'd like to know, of course, if that does become an issue that we need to address, obviously. And there is a public notice, correct me if I'm wrong, David, but public notice does go out to all the neighbors and they have an opportunity to comment on that.
Yeah, that's correct. And I also would note that that is an apartment building to the northwest. I believe those are just standard carports, but we're verifying right now.
Okay, thank you.
To the one question for the applicant, your potential, I guess, need to go over the 80 feet. Could you maybe speak a little bit more to that? You do not have a desire or need to go taller than what's currently proposed?
No, certainly not at this time. And the tower, the way that it's designed now, in order to be raised, it would have to be completely redesigned, essentially. And also, it would have to be new branches through the whole tower. It would have to be structurally completely redone. And, you get into legal territory of what the FCC's intent was as far as the 20-foot extension. So I don't, I'm not an expert on that, but I do know that there's a provision that you're not allowed to defeat the stealthing. So you're not allowed to just increase towers without review if they're a stealth site. Again, I'm getting into territory where I'm not an expert, so that's maybe something that Lee could comment on. But this project does not have the intent of raising the tower, doesn't have any intentions. That would be a completely separate project and one that I haven't seen personally.
Thank you. I guess, Mr. Burke, I guess given this particular location that it is kind of a standalone tree, my concern, I think aesthetically, would be if it did go taller than what it already is, it would go from like sticking out like a sore thumb to like really sticking out. Could that be something, could we condition that it not go any taller?
Well, I would ask the applicant to agree to it, to such a condition, because I also can't verify that there's a regulation that specifically says you can't add the extra 20 feet if it conflicts with the stealthing. I'm not positive that that's true. That might be true, but I just don't know offhand if it is. But if we can get the applicant's agreement to that condition on the record, then it becomes enforceable. And it sounds like he already said they don't have any plan to add on.
No, we don't know, but I can't, it's impossible for me to know what's going to happen in the future of the wireless network. And I wouldn't be representing my client if I were to commit them to something that I couldn't, that I absolutely cannot foresee the future. I will say, though, that with that rule in place, if we wanted to raise the height of the tower and not stealth it, just do it the way that it is now, then that's probably what we would do. In other words, the allowing extra height or not extra height, if we're allowed to add 20 feet for a co-locator with a building permit only, then we would do that regardless, I guess, if that was what we were trying to do here. What we're trying to do here is provide a site that works for us, but also works for zoning and that aesthetically doesn't stick out. If we wanted to do just a tower extension and for a co-located, then that's probably what we would do, but that's not the goal of this project. This project is purely to get T-Mobile, our current tenant, a proper configuration so that it works within the network and the subscribers are provided what they pay for, essentially.
But as it currently stands, as a 55-foot tower, their 20-foot extension would put it at 75 feet.
Right. We can't, if you want to add a condition that just says any ministerial extension is going to have to maintain the mono-eucalyptus aesthetic, you can add that. I just can't guarantee you that that's going to be enforceable. If push comes to shove somewhere down the road, but you can add that.
And I guess another way to look at this was, do we just approve it to the 65-foot maximum and then allow them to build an 80-foot tower?
Well, It's not what they've applied for.
Correct.
So it's kind of like a denial.
thus we keep running into this issue. It would be really good if we could get clear on what the FCC rules are and what that allows us to do. Because I feel like we keep running into this, and it's not real clear to me if we approve or deny a special development permit, or approve one with just one exception, which is the distance to a residential property, but say maximum of 65 feet, does that still allow them to put in a building permit for an 80-foot tower? Sounds like it does.
I mean, a condition limiting this tower to 65 feet it's not a condition. That's a denial, because they're applying for 80-foot tower. But the only way we're going to get, so the verification on this narrow issue of does an extension have to maintain the stealthing, we need a continuance, and to do that without the clock to strike 12 and deem the approval, we would need the applicant to agree to a tolling agreement, basically, to extend their deadline, our deadline. So we can ask them for that.
I would say one of the challenges with that, though, is, this is the fourth meeting on about a 2-year process to get these approved. We've been through the DRAC, we've been through various reviews by the planning department, by the individual groups, the neighborhood group. We've already gone through all that, and they've reviewed the height, they've reviewed the tower. I'm not saying their word is bond. This is, this hearing is what determines the final design, but it has been reviewed by various layers of a super comprehensive zoning review process. Many different groups, many different design reviews. I'm just not quite sure how much more could be asked in terms of a review. I do understand what you're saying, and those are bigger issues though than today. For me, I'm trying to get this project obviously reviewed, and I can't do anything about the federal law one way or the other. That's not this project. This project is purely to get the project you have in front of you approved. There's no future plans to increase the height of the tower or anything like that. I can't really do anything about the way the federal law works, though. It's, not serving me here in particular, but I can't do anything about that one way or the other. All I can, do is put this project forward. And we have gone through the review that's been requested, and it is comprehensive. So I'm hoping that that is enough in this instance to get an approval.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Any other questions for the applicant at this time before we move to public comment? Yes.
Good evening, Commissioners. Todd Smith, Planning Director. No questions of the applicant, but I do want to remark briefly on what Bill was mentioning as it relates to any potential condition. Obviously, the project before us or before you is a 75-foot tall facility. I know that Jessica has done some research, but it's not obviously here in front of us. And so I think adding a condition which we are uncertain, to Bill's point, about our capability to enforce is probably not the best idea. And I think we can commit as staff to coming back separate from this project before you to provide that overview of the current state of federal law as it relates to potential for increases in height subsequent to any action you might take on any of these cell towers.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Sorry to limit, I was just going to kick this discussion to commission deliberation instead of the applicant's time. So any other questions for the applicant? All right, let's go ahead and open up public comment.
And there are currently no public comments in the telephone queue for this. We just got one, so bear with us. And David, did you want the owner to?
Oh, the owner?
No, there's a public commenter in the telephone queue, and the owner is in the Zoom call.
Okay, I'm not sure if the owner wanted to speak on this
Okay.
item or not.
Alrighty, that's fine. We will. Can you please send the caller, Tamika? Hello, caller. You're now in the meeting. Please start with your comment.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to reach out and thank the planning commission for all their hard work, and also the county planners. I also am curious about how we can make an appointment.
Carla,
to
I'm
meet
sorry.
with-
Ma'am, can you please move back just a little bit from the microphone on your phone so that we can hear you? We're having problems understanding what you're saying. Can we try it again? Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I was curious about what the procedure is to make an appointment with the chair of the planning commission to discuss community concerns. I'm trying to find a public email and I'm unable to do so. But I also just wanted to reach out and say thank you to the planning
I can't
commission.
understand.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, we cannot understand you. Would you mind, I think the best action right now would be to hang up and try the call again, other than trying to move your mouth back a little bit from the mouthpiece of the phone and try speaking again. Let's try it again. Okay, go ahead, please.
I was curious about how to reach the chair of the planning commission to set up a meeting to meet in person. And I also wanted to thank the planning commission and the planners of Sacramento County for their hard work these last 8 months. I feel like
What I understood was thank you and also how to contact.
The planning commission.
Planning
that
commission,
may
but
have
we
been
can
it.
be contacted through staff, right?
Absolutely. If you can contact us through boardclerk@saccounty.gov, send us an email, and we will definitely put you in contact with the commissioners. And that concludes your telephone public comments.
And do we,
We're sure the owner doesn't want to speak?
We can check.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to hear from the owner.
Okay.
absolutely, yeah. If the
Okay.
owner is available to speak, we'd definitely like to take a comment.
Okay, Sang Yo, I'm asking you to unmute you. If you'd please unmute your phone, and if you'd like to make a comment, go ahead, please.
Okay, so my name is Sang Ngo. I'm the owner of the property at 6621 and 6629 Florida Road in Sacramento, where the wireless tower is located. And I know they're trying to apply for the permit to improve the tower to 80 foot. Actually, with the business they doing and I sell the least interest to them, I have no problem about that. But the problem is they need to, actually they submit the easement to do that easement to provide them the access for repair. It's not easement for them to make any improvement or new construction on that. That's the first thing. And they do need my permission to apply. And I think this is the second time that they have been applied for the permit. They have failed the first time, but they do put the application on with my name on it without my knowledge. That's the first thing. And I'm here to thank you that Mr. Jacob bring up the issue of the compensation. I have not been received enough from SBA. I've been asking them to whether they can put in the new meter, independent meter for their tower. They only originally have only two antenna. Now they extend it to 6 antenna. And they're going to draw a lot of power from my building. And not saying that have not compensated me enough for the power that they're using. So I know that this is a matter of the civil matter, like the one of the planning officer have told me before when I call him. This is a matter between the owner and the SBA. So I'm here so I can have a chance to speak out what I want to say to Commissioner. And I appreciate that you consider so we can have this matter resolved. I have been bringing this matter a lot of time and long time ago. All they need to do is put in their independent meter so they don't have to draw the power from my property anymore. Then I have no problem with that.
Thank you, Mr. No.
Yes.
Yeah, and as the applicant, we'll accept that as a condition too. If there's a condition to have a separate meter, we know what that means. If you want to condition it, we're more than happy to do that.
Yes, I have been raised that condition with them.
Okay, let's, hey guys, you guys, we're actually in public comment right now, so we can't really go back and forth with the applicant and the owner here and Planning Commission. So I wish those things were worked out, though. But let's talk about public comment. Is there any other public commenters?
And there are no further public comments.
All right. We're going to go ahead and close public comment, and then we can move on to some discussion with the commissioners. It sounds like we had a proposal for a condition for an independent power meter. That was there, seems to be outside of our purview.
Chair Riegel, we have one more that jumped into the public comment queue. Can we go ahead and accept it? I know
Sure.
they generally do for board. Okay.
We'll go ahead and reopen the public comment.
Thank you. Tamika, if you could please send it through. They hung up, so we won't have to. So, we're ready.
With that, we'll go ahead and close public comment.
It's closing now.
All right. At this time, I'll ask the applicant to respond to the public comment.
Yeah, I guess what I would say is the public comment speaks for itself, the lack thereof. I know there is a challenge with the height from the commission, understandably so. But I will say, having done hundreds of these, if there was a real dispute of that height, we would likely see some members of the public and the adjacent public show up to protest that. I'm not saying it's not a concern, and it's self-serving of me to say, let's address that next time or do a private different meeting to address how you're going to handle that going forward. But that's kind of what I'm doing because the project's here and there does not seem to be much opposition from the public, if any, regarding the aesthetic. We've been through an extended review period. It's literally almost a 1.5 to 2 year process with several different commissions, and it is what it is. We do this all the time. That's, we've been through it, but I feel like we have gone through the appropriate level of review for the project, and it stands on its own regardless of what happens in the future. I can't change that from a federal perspective. All I have is this project, and I think that we've done the best job that we can to stealth it, and spending a lot on the aesthetics for this to try to make it a good tower. And regarding saying his comments, that's obviously that needs to get addressed. There's SBA will do it. They haven't been obviously as quick about it as they should be. And, if I take saying at his word that they owe him for the power and that we need to do something about it. And we do. So that will get addressed. And that's up to SBA, obviously. And they do have somebody who is assigned to the case, and they're not moving as fast as Single Lake, understandably, but that will get addressed. I can assure you. SBA is a huge company, and they have a vested interest in making sure that they're taking care of their property owners.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hamilton. All right, with that, we'll move on to deliberation. Anyone want to kick us off this evening or ask any further questions of staff or the applicant?
I had maybe one follow-up for staff.
Sure.
If this is approved as the mono eucalyptus, and they do want to come back and extend it, are they going to be required to make it continuously look like a eucalyptus, or is that aesthetic discretion just at their discretion?
Right, so that's what I was trying to say. Is I don't know that there's a specific regulation that even addresses that. It might be something where the regs are just silent on it. But I do think if you included a condition, they're required. When you're approving a stealth tower, so the idea is that it needs to be stealth, whether it's going to stop at 80 feet or be 100 feet. So I think you'd have a very strong argument that we can enforce that requirement. If they come in for an additional 20 feet, that they have to maintain the tree look. All I'm saying right now is I'm not 100% certain that there's not a reg that says, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to me intuitively that there would be a reg that says it can start as, 80% of this facility can be stealth, and then 20% can just be a tower. That doesn't make sense to me. So I do kind of feel like there's a pretty good argument for defensibility of a condition that would require 100% stealthing when they come, when they come back in.
So maybe correct me if I'm wrong. I see the choices here as a denial of the application, in which case we would get probably an 80-foot pole, because they'd come back and extend what they currently have.
Yeah, if they haven't already.
Or an 80-foot eucalyptus that could go to 100 feet.
So if I may add a bit more, Bill, to your, I've been perusing the internet thanks to Wi-Fi over here. And there is in some FCC regulation document, there's a narrative describing what is a substantial change. And part of those criteria includes, hang on, let me get there. A modification is a substantial change if it would defeat the concealment elements of the wireless tower or base station. So the concealment is the stealthing that Bill is talking about. And so it sounds like, at least based on my skimming of this document that I'm looking at, that County Council is correct.
So they would have to come back before the Planning Commission for that extra 20 feet if they wanted it to look like a...
No, if they did the extra 20 feet without the stealthing, then it would go to code enforcement, because it would be a violation of the condition.
So without our condition without adding a condition, it's already required to have stealthing. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah,
Correct.
I mean, by the reg, potentially.
Yeah. I mean, this is the applicant, but
That's all right. That's all right. We got it.
We have heard the applicant's testimony under oath as he believes that is the nature of the regulation. But I wouldn't just rely on I would also include a condition, just to kind of a belt and suspenders approach to that.
Sure. You want to take a stab at drafting that? I'm looking through the conditions right now and anything that we could hop onto.
So Chair Rathel, you want a condition that repeats the FCC regulation language? Would that make you more comfortable?
I would say any future modification, any future ministerial modification to raise the antenna for co-location purposes shall maintain the mono-eucalyptus stealthing.
Yes, which is the same as the FCC regulations.
Well,
state.
I mean,
we can
I don't
do
know.
that.
I don't think that's
fine.
the exact language of the reg, but we
No.
think that that's,
We can specify the mono-eucalyptus for sure.
yeah.
May I ask a question about the timing, about the, if it's going to be a 10-year?
So we've already gone past the applicant's presentation, and
You can answer his question.
sure.
You can try to. Is there a condition on?
David would probably know that too. If this is a 10-year, I don't recall.
Sorry, could you repeat the question? Was it for the life of the use permit if it expires within 10 years? Is that the
so.
question?
Correct. Is
Okay.
it a 10-year?
No, it is not conditioned as such.
Okay.
I did notice the easement's good for only another 17 years.
Correct.
Would the commission like to continue deliberation while we work out this condition?
Sounds great. Other concerns to discuss this evening or thoughts on the project as a whole? Sure.
I guess I have just general concerns that if we're going to deviate from and allow this, is that there really is no, and maybe I missed it in the materials, but no evidence to show improved coverage. And I know he said there's no improved coverage, it's maintaining the coverage, but I didn't see that in our documents. But maybe I missed it.
There was.
Okay.
This was their coverage map. It's a little bit hard to decipher, but it basically shows that the existing coverage would be maintained.
Right, but not, but it's not improving. I'm looking at that map, and to me, it kind of looks the same.
Right. And to the applicant's point, it's really to maintain as existing.
Right, but it's going to be taller now, so I guess I would assume, and there's new technology, I would assume it would improve the coverage even a little bit, but
Right.
I don't know enough about it.
Other comments?
Chair Rathel, do we have in our power to be able to condition the separate meter?
I'd say so. You're kind of getting into issues, again, kind of like the lease terms and the easement terms, but it sounded like the applicant was agreeable to something along those lines on the meter. Yeah.
At least that's what I heard from both the applicant and the owner. And so if we're coming into some sort of agreement, perhaps just including that would be a good choice.
Other commissioners' thoughts on conditioning that? I have some concerns without looking at the agreement and getting into what the best way is to resolve that without the owner here or the applicant here. Both over Zoom communications is a little challenging. But we are under time crunch and everything like that. So, I look at it and go, what could be the harm of an independent meter so I can get on board. We can check with the applicant for sure. I know they're on board. And I guess since the owner, it's weird having an owner that's not with the applicant here and having them in public comment instead. So Can we check in with the owner too, even though they're on public comment?
It's your discretion to continue speaking to
good.
either or both of them.
Sounds good. So yeah, let's check in. Let's start with the applicant. You seem to be amenable to a condition for an independent power meter. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, let's check in with the owner now. Would that resolve some of the concern with the project? Saying?
He's muted.
They are with the condition that they will put in their independent power. I think that would be great.
Okay, sounds great. So we've got 2 conditions to draft. Thank you both. And thank you, Commissioner Borja. Other concerns this evening or topics to discuss? You guys are ready with 2 conditions?
We are.
All right.
I will read them, and then I'm going to email them to the clerk. So condition number 1, additional condition number 1, any future ministerial modification to raise the antenna for a co-location shall maintain the proposed mono-eucalyptus stealthing design. Number 1. Okay.
Well, you're looking at them like, we don't have a motion yet, so
Right.
Yeah.
we don't know if
2,
they're asking for this or not.
Number 2, the project proponent shall install an independent power meter to serve the proposed wireless communication facility.
Mr. Chair.
Thoughts? Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I just want to make sure, for clarification, are we going to be voting on these as independent motions or as a package?
Someone could make, it depends on whatever the motion is from the commissioner. If they're going to make a motion with both of these, then however it gets motioned, we can take it on. Do you have concerns with either of those 2 as written?
I do feel like the independent power panel is warranted. I still haven't really wrapped my head around the necessity of the aesthetic verbiage. So I think at this point, I feel more comfortable separating these out. And I'd be happy to make a motion in support of the independent power panel.
All right, so the motion is staff recommendation plus the condition related to independent power.
I think
Well, I'm wondering
to...
what, right, I mean, this is the question is your motion to approve the project with condition number 2, and then that would leave, for the rest of you, either you get a second or you don't. Now, the rest of you could vote against that if you prefer to have that first condition. Or you might get a motion to amend if you get a second on that motion. Or someone else could make a motion. I mean, okay, if you've made your motion, we can wait for a second if that's your motion.
So the motion is with the second condition?
Correct.
Got it. And do we have a second to that motion? All right.
If there's no second, anyone else can jump in and make do
we have another
motion anew?
My kind of general concerns with these projects overall are like this continuing height. And I know we don't have much control over the extension of these. So to the extent that they can continue to at least attempt at a stealth feature, I guess I would technically be making a substitute.
There's no motion on the floor. There was no second.
Oh, okay. Make a motion to approve this project with the 2 conditions that a separate power meter be provided and that any extension in the future maintain the project's eucalyptus and stealth
As
nature.
read into the record by
as read into the
planning
record.
department.
Correct.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. I am going to check in since we haven't checked in with the applicant and the owner since the language was prepared by staff. So I just want to make sure that that language is acceptable to the applicant.
Yes.
And can we check in and make sure that language is acceptable to the owner? He's not on. I know you're looking at the Zoom screen. Is he giving a thumbs up or a yes? Or
Yes.
yes, perfect. All right. Thank you so much. I just wanted to make sure that that language was good for you guys. Further deliberation, I guess I'll weigh in here. We don't have, public outcry at this, location. And it is, really an aesthetics discussion, I think, that we're having at planning, other than the fall radius. We do seem to be far enough away with residential properties that I don't have concerns over the fall radius on this project. Aesthetics-wise, it's pretty ugly right now. It's going to be pretty ugly when it's constructed, but it is what it is. We have a lot of these. I guess it looks a little better than it did, and I think that my larger concerns are with, like Commissioner Devlin stated, was, the combined impacts of these over and over and over and over again, plus the extra 20 feet. So getting more clarity on that. I really appreciate you guys coming back in a separate item later on that. This project in particular, I don't have significant aesthetic concerns with, as opposed to some other projects we've seen. So I'm going to be supporting. Any other comments? All right, will you call the roll, please?
Okay. Commissioner Borja.
Yes.
Conklin.
Yes.
Corona Sabignano.
No.
Devlin.
Yes.
And Rathel.
Yes.
And the motion carries as read into the record by the Planning Director, Todd Smith.
Thank you, staff, for your help with that one. Well, that moves us to item number 3.
And for item number 3 this evening, we have a use permit amendment, and it's located at 9436 Fruit Ridge Road at the southwest intersection of Fruit Ridge Road and Mayhew Road in the Vineyard community. And the environmental document is the final environmental impact report memorandum.
Hi, good evening.
And if we could. Thank you.
All right, good evening. I'm Mark Michelini with Planning and Environmental Review, and I'm going to present the Aspen 3 South Use Permit Amendment, PLMP 2023-00157. The property is located at 9436 Fruit Ridge Road at the southwest intersection of Fruit Ridge and Mayhew Road in the Vineyard community. It's in the thing in the hatched red. The community context, it's zoned IR with the surface mining overlay. To the north of the site is also IR and without the surface mining and AR2. To the south is more IR with surface mining, and there's a little M1 area. And to the east and west are both IR zoning with surface mining overlay. Okay, on January 8, 1992, the board approved a community plan amendment rezone and use permit to allow mining on 112 acres. Then on October 20th, 1999, the board approved an amendment to allow an additional 31 acres to be mined on the site, and the additional acres is the Morrison Creek, or part of the Morrison Creek. Then on January 8th, 2013, the board approved a use permit and reclamation plan amendment to allow mining of Morrison Creek. So this request is a use permit amendment to revise condition number 62 from prior use permit PLNP 2008-0016 and condition number 64 from prior use permit 1994-0484 to extend the term of reclamation for an additional 8 years to December 15th, 2031. The project went to the Vineyard Planning Commission on January 11th, 2024, and they recommended approval 3-0 with 1 absent. Okay, there are no changes to the project other than the time extension for the reclamation. The project site, as far as the mining aspect of it, is done. There's no more mining, it's just reclamation. The final hearing body for this project is the Board of Supervisors, and the environmental coordinator has determined that the environmental impact report as prepared for the original use permit 1990-1084 is still adequate and appropriate for the current project. Staff is recommending to recognize the environmental coordinator's memorandum dated October 11th, 23, and determine the final environmental impact report for Aspen 3 use permit, community plan amendment, and rezone is still adequate and appropriate for the proposed project, and revise condition number 62 from PLNMP 2008-0016 and condition number 64 from 1994-044 of the approved use permit, subject to findings and conditions listed in attachment 2 of this report, which would extend reclamation period to December 15th, 2031. That concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you so much. Questions for staff this evening? Yep, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So just as I understand it, the applicant's not proposing any new or expanded mining activities as part of this project, just additional time, 8 years. Wanted to get a sense of how that number or that time period came to be by the applicant.
Well, the applicant proposed that. What's essentially for is they have a pre-wash facility that washes some of the rock. So they have a lot of, water with dirt in it, as you could say. So these are for drying beds. So they'll pump the water out to a, huge, detention basin, however you want to, ponds is what we usually call them. They'll dry out, start, then they'll, harden up, they'll survey them, make sure it's hard, and they just keep adding to it. So it's like taking their waste from the pre-wash and using it to make the pits higher, to increase the elevation of the pits, which helps for the reclamation when they're done to make them more usable when they're not so, deep as pits. The applicant can probably explain the exact number of, why they chose 8 years.
No problem. I appreciate that. I understood there was a purpose, was to elevate the pits. I just wasn't too sure how 8 years came since we're looking at an expanded period of time. But thank you very much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for staff this evening? All right. Thank you, Mr. Michelini.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to invite the applicant up, and we'll get you sworn in.
Hi there. If you could please raise your right hand and the appropriate responses I do. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give this commission is the truth, so help you God? And if you do not swear, do you so affirm?
I do.
And if you could state your name for the record and...
Nick Cronin-Wet.
Thank you, and make the statement, I have been sworn.
I have been sworn.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. Obviously, we want to thank Mark, who's been doing a great job as our analyst in moving this project forward. Happy to answer any questions. Again, I'm Nick Cronin-Wet. I'm the project manager for Tykert Materials.
Do you want to address the 8-year timeline?
Yeah, so essentially what we're doing is, just as Mark described, we have kind of a chain of facilities, and the pre-wash is coming back to this area, and they're actually called fines. And so what we're doing is we're pumping the fines into this pit to bring it back up to grade, and that takes a while because obviously the material, it's still wet when it comes to the pit. So what we're doing is we're going to put the fines in the pond, and then eventually over time we're going to compress and compact them so it's able to be used at a higher grade in the future, and that just takes time. So that's one of the reasons for the extension.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Any other questions for the applicant this evening? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
With that, we'll move on to public comment.
And there are no public comments this evening.
With that, we'll close public comment and look for a motion or discussion.
Motion. Move the bill.
Motion.
Move the item.
All right. Commissioner Conklin's motion for staff recommendation.
I'll second that. Oh, there you go.
And we've got a second from Commissioner Devlin.
Okay. Okay. And Commissioner Sporha?
Yes.
Conklin?
Yes.
Corona Savignano?
Yes.
Devlin?
Yes.
And Rathel?
Yes.
And the motion carries.
All right, that concludes item number 3. Please call item number 4.
So your item number 4 this evening is a use permit amendment, special development permit and design review, and it's located at 4261 Elkhorn Boulevard at the northwest corner of the intersection of Elkhorn Boulevard and Mortimer Road in the North Highlands Fiddle Farms community, and the environmental document is a mitigated negative declaration.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Leanne Mueller with Planning and Environmental Review. This project is PLMP 2021-00268. It is the Arco at Larchmont Village. So it is located at 4261 Elkhorn Boulevard, which is the northwest corner of the intersection of Elkhorn Boulevard and Wallerger Road. It is in the Larchmont neighborhood of the North Highlands community. So this is an existing service station. It was constructed on the site in 1992, and the site is fully developed with the existing 12-pump service station. It also has an existing car wash, and then it is also has an under canopy convenience store. So its zoning is LC, which is our light commercial zoning district. To the north, there is another kind of strip shopping center that has the same zoning district. To the east, across Waller Road, there is a fast food restaurant, and then there is another shopping center use. And then to the south, across Elkhorn Boulevard, there is another automobile service station. And then to the west, with a shared boundary line, there are some single-family residences. Okay, so going over the entitlement history, because this is existing, the parcel was established in its current configuration in 1988. The automobile service station, car wash, and convenience store uses were approved by the board in 1989, and it was approved for the primary service station, and it did set hours of operation for the use as 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. for the service station and the convenience store, and then 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. for that car wash use. And these were the existing structures that were on there in 1992. So as I've said, this project is a use permit amendment, which would allow the reconstruction of that existing gas station and convenience store, and to allow 24-hour operation of the gas station and the convenience store. And essentially what would be occurring is, as we've discussed, is that car wash that is currently there would be removed. It would essentially be replaced by a larger standalone convenience store almost in the same spot. And then what would happen is there would be 2 pumps which would be placed where that convenience store is. So that's kind of the larger aspects of this project. And again, it would be a 24-hour operation. There's also going to be a special development permit to deviate from some of the current standards for development of an automobile service station, and I'm going to go over them now. So what you're looking at is interior side setbacks adjacent to the single-family use for that new convenience store. So currently that requirement is 25 feet. The applicant is requesting a 19-foot separation along that western property line. The other thing that you're seeing is the street side yard setbacks for that convenience store. So currently it's 50 feet. The existing car wash is at about approximately 45, and the applicant proposes 43 feet for the street side yard separation for the convenience store from Wallerger Road. The other thing that you're seeing is a deviation from the minimum landscape coverage requirement for service stations. Our zoning code requires 20%. The applicant is proposing 17%. There is the minimum landscape planter adjacent to the residential uses. The zoning code requires 7 feet. In some areas of that landscape plan, it is going to be 5 feet, which is the existing planter width. And it's a little hard to see, but it is pretty much adjacent to where the existing canopy is. And when we get to like the site plan and the landscape plan, I'll point those out to you. The other item is the trash enclosure perimeter landscaping and the trash enclosure location. Because they're having to move it from its existing location, it is getting approximately 3 feet closer to the residences on the west, and then it needs to deviate from some of the landscape requirements because of the way the existing driveways configure on the site. And then we get into the maximum signage for automobile service stations. They are asking to increase the allowed signage because currently for automobile service stations, you get approximately 125 square feet. The other last deviation is the parking lot shading, and that requirement specifically applies to the parking lots in front of the ARCO. They are proposing 40%. Our requirement is 50%. And this is also a design review to comply with the countywide design guidelines. So this is the site plan that we have proposed by the applicant. So what you are seeing is that essentially the existing car wash is located here. It will be removed and it will be replaced by the proposed 2,600 square foot convenience store. The other item is that under the canopy currently, approximately right here is the existing convenience store. Obviously, that's going to be demolished and be replaced by the pumps. You will also note that the existing trash enclosure is located approximately here. It would be moving to approximately here. The other item of note is that right along here is the 5-foot landscape strip that exists. It is proposed to remain. This is the landscape plan. So the applicant has proposed to rehabilitate and add landscaping to the site. Especially of note is that there's going to be additional trees along that western frontage that it does share with the residences. And then also one of the existing driveways is proposed to be removed. It will be moved to a different location and it will be replaced with landscaping. These are the elevations for the convenience store. One thing to note is that there is articulation on all 4 sides of the building because it could potentially be visible from all 4 sides, especially the shopping center to the north. Again, color materials board. And then again, this is the project analysis. We've gone over a lot of it, but essentially what you're looking at is the proposal is to remove the existing car wash, add a new convenience store, and allow it to have 24-hour operation. And they will be proposing upgrades, including new landscaping throughout the site. The project did go to the North Highlands Foothill Farms CPAC, and they did recommend approval of this project when it was heard before them in 2022. The proposed project is also reviewed by DRAC in 2022, and they recommended that the Board of Supervisors find the project in substantial compliance with the design guidelines. An initial study and mitigated negative declaration were prepared for this project pursuant to CEQA. It was released for review on December 5th of 2023. We did not receive any public comments on that document. It discussed impacts to aesthetics, air quality, noise, hazards and hazardous materials, and greenhouse gas emissions. Largely, it found that it would have a less than significant impact with some mitigation measures, which are included in the conditions and the mitigation monitoring and reporting program. That being said, the staff recommendation for this project is approval, and staff would like the Planning Commission to make a recommendation to the board of the following: determine that the environmental analysis prepared pursuant to CEQA is adequate and complete, adopt the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, approve the use permit amendment subject to the findings and conditions included in your staff report as attachment 2, and also approve the special development permit, which is attachment 4, and then find that the project is in compliance with the design guidelines, subject to the findings and conditions. That concludes staff's presentation, and myself can answer any questions, and then the applicant and the representative are also here tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Mueller. Questions for staff this evening?
Just really quickly on the signage, what was there? Are they kind of entitled to without a variance, and how much are they requesting again?
Sorry. So essentially, gasoline service stations get 125 square feet of signage. And so the applicant is proposing additional signage. Most of that comes from, like, they want to put some logos with the ARCO branding and their spark on the canopy. And then they would like to have some additional signage on the pumps themselves. So that's where most of that additional square footage is coming from. And they're proposing to have around slightly over 400 square feet of signage.
Okay, and does that include, I'm looking at the colors board, these 6, I guess what I would describe as like an advertising window in front of the store?
The POP windows?
The applicant is here. If you would like to swear her in, she can definitely answer those questions for you.
Let's keep it to staff at this point, but we'll invite the applicant up here in a few minutes.
I just have a quick question on, is this site already permitted to sell alcohol, or is this a new condition of no selling between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m.?
The site is already permitted to sell alcohol, so that's an existing condition.
Okay, great, thank you.
Commissioner Conklin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question just regarding the canopy reduction size from 50 to 40%. What were the dictating factors that caused for that 10% reduction?
So essentially, what we're talking about is the parking spaces in front of the proposed convenience store. I think there's like 7 or 8 of them, and it requires 50% shading. And so what happens is the applicant has proposed essentially 2 islands on either side of those to provide shading, and they could potentially put one in the center, but that would require them to reduce their parking spaces. And then our discussions with the applicant on that are that, one, they generally prefer not to do that because it reduces the visibility of the store, like being able to see out into the parking lot and people seeing into the store. And then also they find that customers tend to destroy landscaping. They either run it over or walk on it.
I got a follow-up to the signage question. Is it normal, I'm just trying to think, I don't think I've seen the dispenser valences counted as signage in the past. And what's the trigger for that? Because that's like most of the signage increase. Like without that, yes, they would be over, but essentially be the same. And I'm looking at I think it's the Shell station that's there right now. They've got their logo on every pump. I feel like most gas stations I go to have their logo on every pump. So what's the trigger to call that signage and just a fuel pump that's logoed?
Yeah, we do count it. I think it's more of an artifact of how we've interpreted our zoning code over the years for the signage. So it is an interpretation that we have carried forward. I don't know, getting a little bit off topic, that may change when we update our sign ordinance, but that's how we've interpreted over the years, and we've just carried it forward.
Okay.
Regarding the 24-hour operation, are there currently in place some mechanism that, I'm just thinking of like security issues, if there are generated calls for service, is there a mechanism in which the county can say, okay, we now will require you to have on-site security during hour X to hour Y?
I was just double checking the conditions of approval, because generally what happens is we do sometimes add conditions of approval regarding like time drop for the safe. I believe that one's condition 21. We generally have like the video cameras or the recording devices, so that's condition of approval number 23. And then a lot of times we'll have like a security plan that they provide, which shows like camera locations and outside lighting and that type of thing. So that's generally what we do end up having as part of our conditions generally.
In addition to what Leanne has already mentioned, I think beginning on page 17 of attachment 2, there are, starting at condition number 61 through, of course, my computer stopped. There's a number of conditions there from the Sacramento Sheriff's Office related to site security.
To follow up on what Todd was saying, it's 61 through, it looks like 69.
Okay, and then to follow up on what Leanne was saying, I don't believe that we do have any conditioning that requires security. If there's, certain issues on site, certainly something you could bring up with the applicants if you are concerned about that. It's not normally something we get from the sheriff's office, who tends to provide the more security-related conditioning.
On the canopy itself, is it our understanding that all the solar panels will be remaining? Okay. So when we talk about, and I guess this is more of a question toward the overall landscaping and shading of the parcel, because that canopy does take up a significant portion. There's no adjustment to our shading requirements or the landscaping requirements if a good portion of the site's covered with solar.
No, there is not.
Okay, just figured I wanted to ask before we kind of dove into that. The only other thing I would ask on this site is, it looks like there's a cut through to the adjacent parcel to the north.
Mm-hmm.
Was that important to staff that remain, or was that just how the application came in?
That's how the application came in, but generally, to some extent, if there's an existing driveway to another site, staff does prefer that they do remain, because it basically then reduces people having to go out onto the roadway to then get back into an adjacent business. So if they're there, we do generally like them to stay.
And there's no concern, I know the access to the parcel is being moved to the north for this parcel. There's no concern about those being too close to the neighboring parcel from you guys or Department of Transportation?
It was reviewed by DOT, and we have conditions of approval, and I am not aware that they had any concerns that they raised.
The last one I'll ask, and I can save it for the applicant too if you guys don't have an opinion on it, but when I see trimming trees to fit the building, I have a little concern about the viability of those trees going forward. Has the arborist reviewed that, or is that something I should reserve for the applicant?
I would reserve that for the applicant, please.
Any other questions for staff at this time?
Just a quick question. Thank you, Chair. Since we're adding 2 more pumps, but removing the car wash, do we anticipate that that would be a negligible traffic impact? I mean, I'm also reading the MMRP and the SMACMed analysis because it's technically also adding a couple more pumps, so I would imagine there would be more vehicles visiting, but can you speak to that change?
I believe that that was determined to be negligible in the analysis in the MMRP.
Any other questions for staff at this time? All right, at this time, I'd like to invite the applicant team down to address the commission. And we'll get you sworn in.
Okay, hello there. Please raise your right hand, and the appropriate response is I do. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give the commission is the truth, so help you God? And if you do not swear, do you so affirm?
I do.
Okay, if you'd state your name for the record and make the statement, I have been sworn.
Leslie Burnside, and I have been sworn.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I also have the owner and operator here, Paul Bajwa, with me tonight. And I have some notes here from what we were talking about, but just real quick. Thank you, Leanne. Did a really nice job with the presentation there. I don't really have another presentation to go over. I have a few things I wanted to go ahead and point out. First of all, I wanted to, there was a lot of questions about security. Paul is a founding member of the Antelope Business Community, PBID. He currently serves as the secretary. He and all members of the PBID, participate and work on betterment for the community. He has a security firm that does regular audits and drive-bys with the location. So I did want to let you know that in terms of security and the integrity of asking for 24-hour operation with the responsibility that comes with that, you have a very engaged community member, officially engaged, as well as being the owner and operator there on the corner. I wanted to go ahead and mention a little bit about the 24-hour operation. It is incredibly important. It's important because there have been upward pressures on wages for reasons that we all understand, having gone through COVID and the Great Resignation. It's also a requirement of his franchisor with the new ARCO agreement, supply agreement. We received no derogatory or opposition comments from CPAC about it. We even had some comments at the CPAC presentation that it is something that's needed. Paul has a lot of customers from the area. Some of them are in those houses that are just on his western property line, and it is definitely something that the community is of value. Right across the street, the 7-Eleven that's been there, I think, for about, oh gosh, I'm going to get this wrong, 7 or 17 years? Can't remember. It's been operating 24 hours the whole time. It's got a very similar layout. But most importantly, it's got also about 5 single-family residences right on his western property line. So we're simply asking for parity with the direct competitor across the street. Something you also need to be aware of, that although the station does not currently operate 24 hours, for security reasons, those lights stay on overnight. Okay. We are doing new retrofits of the site lights and new canopy lights. So everything will be recessed, shielded. And we have lighting fixtures, site lights that are 3 feet shorter than the 7-Eleven across the street. So we have even more enhanced the limits of the impact there. Let's see. I did want to touch a little bit on shade. I'm glad that one of the commissioners had asked Leanne about the fuel canopy. I think it was the chair. Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of shade out there. But because of retaining that existing canopy, it's a big expense to redo it, and there really wasn't any need. But because the property is so long and narrow, and we were further constrained by retaining that existing canopy, that's the reason why you'll see some of the reasons for the special development permits. But when you do add that in, yeah, 40% shade, according to how the county calculates that, is 458 square feet. 50% is 580 square feet. We're 7,314 square feet if you add the canopy in there also. So I do think that, for the intents of providing some shading, it's there. I didn't know if we wanted to go back to the signage. But the gentleman who was asking about the POP posters on the building are included in our calculations. But Leanne is right. The majority of the reason why we have to ask for the additional square footage is mostly the way that it's calculated as far as decals and logos and things that are at the dispensers. When I first encountered this issue a few years ago with Leanne on another ARCO project, it's like it seems very weird to come in and ask for the commission and the board to approve 400 and something square feet of signage when it's so dramatically larger than 125 feet square footage. But that, as Leanne had mentioned, there was a reason and an evolution for that. We're very excited to bring the project forward. We're, despite the limitations of some of the things with the size and shape and retaining of the fuel canopy, we think we've provided you some very dynamic landscaping upgrades. We think it's a very good upgrade for the area. So we hope that you can support everything, particularly the 24-hour, and I'm here for questions.
And just to confirm, the solar panels that are on the existing canopy will be retained?
They will.
Okay. And can you talk a little bit just about the trees that are right to the north of what's going to be the convenience store? Mm-hmm. It just looks like I've had a commercial property with trees very close in the past, and it can lead to a number of issues. So I'm just wondering, will those trees survive both the construction and then long term, how will they be maintained away from the building? Mm-hmm. Because tree can cause issues to the building can cause issues to the trees, and we want to make sure both are there long term. So
sure. We don't want to cause any harm to a tree. It's because it was taking us some considerable time to get our environmental document because of staff shortages and other reasons that we understand. We went ahead and have already submitted our construction documents for concurrent at our risk. One of the things that actually has come up is DWR has mentioned something about one of those very trees you're talking about. I'm not sure exactly what the issues are. We just got the comments fairly recently, but they were talking in terms of pruning it back. Well, I'm not sure what kind of tree it is. I'm not really good about that, but it's branched off into two significant branches off from the trunk. We're kind of a little bit worried about if you trim one of those, that's a significant part of the tree you're getting rid of. Is it going to survive it? So we didn't have an arborist report on this project, but one of the things that we are having to do is to get an arborist involved so we can address the plan check comment. It may be that, depending on what the issue is, if the tree has to go, we would replace it in kind. It is actually on the adjacent property owner's property, but Paul has a very good relationship with them, and I'm sure we can work out anything, and obviously it would be at the applicant's expense, whatever we end up doing. So I did want to make sure you were aware we're very sensitive to the fact that we do have some trees that are close to the new construction going on. And there are some protection notes in the conditions as well.
Sounds good. Thank you for addressing that. Other questions for the applicant this evening?
Chair, just have a couple questions. Thank you for the presentation, ma'am, and for the staff. Just curious, because it's increasing the footprint of the actual physical store, does that trigger any Cal Green Code requirements for having EV-ready parking spaces for retail?
It's actually not based on the size of the store. It's based on the number of parking stalls. So what the building code requires is that we provide infrastructure for, I believe it's just one EV stall, which we do, so it's for future. So we provide the conduit to it, and we make sure that there is capacity on the electrical board.
Okay. I'm sorry, was that in the drawings that you've shared, that there was an EV-ready space?
Well, we don't have a requirement to actually provide an EV charger at this time.
Right, an EV-capable space based on Cal Green Code, right? And is that on your, was that on your drawings?
Yeah, I don't know that you'd actually see it in an entitlement level drawing, but you definitely would see it at construction document level, because we would be showing where those conduits are going to be installed and all of that.
So you will...
Plus the electrical switchgear and, the panels.
So you are mentioning that you will have one EV-capable space in the future?
We will comply with California Green Building Code.
2022, okay, thank you. And then second thing is, I don't believe that the project scope is changing the size of your underground fuel tanks?
No, we're not touching those. They're in good shape.
Okay, but you're also increasing 2 more dispensers in a 24-hour period. I was just wondering if there was any consideration about potentially increasing that due to what I would see is like more traffic or more customers, hopefully. Or is just that you guys have not considered that?
I'm not understanding your question.
I'm asking the applicant whether or not you've considered increasing the size of your underground fuel facility storage, or do you feel that it would still meet your need with those 2 extra required dispensers or extra dispensers?
Well, actually, we would be adding them, so we would have 8 dispensers and 16 fueling positions altogether. Currently, there are 6 dispensers, 12 fueling positions.
But you're maintaining the same size of tank.
Yeah,
She said they're not touching them, right?
We're not touching the underground storage tanks. There is some piping that, because we're putting in new dispensers, there's some piping that has to be extended from, and there's probably portions of the existing piping. I think we're going to go ahead and replace it just because it seems like that's a really good thing to do since we're already torn up. But the tanks are not being touched.
Okay, understood.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, I'm only curious because that also triggers the SMACMIN and the MMRP if that tank size was to change. So since you confirmed that, thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Other questions for the applicant this evening? All right. Thank you, Ms. Burnside.
Thank you.
With that, we will open it up to public comment.
And there are none.
All right. We'll go ahead and close public comment. Anyone want to kick us off this evening?
Mr. Chair, I want to compliment presentation made just now, as well as staff's work on the analysis. I think this project represents a lot of challenges with the space that were there, and trying to work within the confines of that space in order to increase the amount of pumps in order to service the community, and I think it did an exemplary job. I think the rendition really helps visualize this. I think it's going to be a wonderful project for economic development in the area. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Any other comments this evening?
No, I think the parity of the operations with their competitor, I think, is a very fair point that the applicant brings up.
Anyone else? I'm happy to move staff recommendation, and really just wanted to explain a little bit of my thoughts on that is when you guys all know my love of the use of the special development permit. When I looked at this originally, I looked and I saw 7 exceptions to ours. But as I kind of worked through the project and understood the reasons behind the exceptions, started to be clear, and maybe a little bit of code that needs updating. And I know you guys are in the process of doing that, but I also think that this project has justified those exceptions, and it does look like a good project, and I'm comfortable with the rationale behind the special development permit findings and the requests. So I'm happy to move staff recommendation.
Second.
And any other further deliberation or comments before I call for vote? All right, please call the roll.
And Chair Mabel, I'm sorry, I missed who made the second.
We both did.
Commissioner Conklin, I think Commissioner Conklin made the second? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's what we'll go with then. Commissioners Borja,
Yes.
Conklin? Yes. Corona Savignano?
Yes.
Devlin?
Yes.
And Rathel?
Yes.
And the motion carries.
All right, that concludes our contested portion of the agenda and moves us on to the miscellaneous portion of the agenda. First up, we have the election of chair and vice chair this evening. And I'll start off with anyone wanting to throw their name in the hat for chair and vice chair.
I would love to make a motion that the current chair stay.
I'm happy to continue serving as the chair. If you guys so desire, I'm also happy to step out of the way and let somebody else run the meetings for a while if anyone has that desire.
I'll second that motion.
All right, did you make a motion there?
Yeah, I thought I did.
All right. So, and what was your motion?
To keep the current chair.
Okay. And we have a motion.
I'll throw my name in the hat for vice chair.
Okay. Anyone else want to throw their name in the hat for vice chair?
It's fine.
All right. Did you want to extend your
Sure. I would,
motion
make
for
a
both?
friendly amendment to myself. For Commissioner Borja for vice chair.
Second.
And Commissioner Borja seconded. So we have a motion for myself as chair and Commissioner Borja as the vice chair. Any discussion or deliberation? Or last minute names wanting to be thrown in the hat? One more try. All right, going once, going twice. Will you please call the roll?
Commissioners Borja,
Yes.
Conklin? Yes. Corona Savignano?
Yes.
Devlin? Yes. And Rathel?
Yes.
And the motion carries.
All right, we'll move on now to item number 6 is the planning director's report.
I do not have a report this evening.
Sounds good. Any miscellaneous scheduling items?
Yes. Okay, so as usual, I kind of want to preview the next couple of meetings. So next meeting, I believe, is the 11th, and that is the long anticipated, awaited, feared Jesuit High School lighting project. That is the only hearing item on the agenda. You are the final hearing body. So that should be a big one. We do have another cell facility that is on the docket for the 25th. So I was wanting to ask the commission if you would like us to bring back a report for the next hearing on cell facilities and, the research that we've done on what we have, sort of local land use authority on. I would probably put that after the Jesuit hearing item, just so we can clear the room, but you all also might be exhausted by that point. So I kind of wanted to open it up and see what people think.
I don't know if I would want to hear anything after that item.
Could you make it really dry at the start of the March 11th meeting?
Put everyone asleep. You might have a lot of public comments on it if we put it first.
Yeah, I'm fine with it being second. I get it. It may be a little late, but I think that's better than probably having it on the 25th when we're also talking about a cell facility the same night. It can get a little gray whether we're talking about a project or a long-term, strategy or approach.
Fair point.
Bill, what's the, is there any Brown Act violation for me to send information to the commissioners on some of this research that we've done on wireless facilities as a group? Or is that something that I would need to post?
Oh, it would just become a public document.
Mm-hmm.
But no, they don't have to have a meeting to receive a memo from you.
Okay. So we might be able to kind of cut into a little bit of extra time, and I'll see if I can get something to you guys prior, and then also include it we would probably put this under director report.
Yeah, it makes sense to put it under director's report since it's not really an action item.
Right.
So on the 11th?
Correct.
Yeah.
How many items besides Jesuit are there?
None.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then the 25th, there is a general plan update round or general plan report back.
It's our general plan annual report, comes to the Planning Commission every year in March, right before the board, so.
And then that wireless facility as well. So that's the 25th. And finally, I ask every time, does anyone know if they will not be in attendance either the 11th or the 25th at this point? Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other miscellaneous scheduling items? All right. How about general public comments?
And we have someone who is jumping in and out of the queue, but currently she is out of the queue. So shall I close the queue?
If we don't.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and close the queue, and queues are closed.
All right. We will go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 7:47. Thank you all for your time tonight.
Okay.